Hello, all. Garland Nixon here with my dear friends Andrei Martyanov and Scott Ritter, and we got lots to talk about for the next hour. Let's talk. Hello, everyone. Don't forget, Andrei Martyanov has a great YouTube channel, Smoothie X12, and it's great. There's great stuff. I never miss a show, so make sure you go to Andrei's YouTube page and subscribe. Andrei, you've got a blog also. What's your blog?
Reminiscence of the Future.
Reminiscence of the Future. And Scott Ritter, go to scottritter.com. That's scottritter.com for all Scott's good work. Don't forget, when you go to these guys' sites, there's ways to donate. Make sure you find the ways that you follow them all, their social media platforms. Make sure you donate, Patreon, whatever the case may be. Any way you can find to donate. These guys do a lot of good work. And, you know, you got to pay for this stuff. You got to keep going. It helps them. It helps all of us. Okay, let's get going. Let's start with this. In light of some of the political changes, we are seeing that, for instance, there's an article right here. Number of Ukrainians open to territorial concessions growing. Yeah, as if they really are going to have a choice in that matter. You know, as if the Russian military is going to call them and say, do you mind if we take this next village, or would you like it back? I don't think that's happening. But what we're seeing is apparently Zelensky talked to Trump. Things are, shall we say, not going so well on the battlefield. It appears that the reality of the future of Ukraine, such as it is starting to hit home. Let's start with you, Andrei. What's happening on the battlefield? How do you see things going over the next couple of weeks, months, etc.?
Well, there is a steady movement ahead. New York is about to fall, okay? That sounds crazy, right? New York is about to fall. So, no, it is. I mean, Russian army is now, Russian formations are already fighting in the center of New York. And so they will be pushing the, well, they have about, in the center alone, they have 2 battalions surrounded. So they're pretty much dead, most likely. So, yeah, there is a movement all over the front, really. So, and we discussed it with Scott. Scott explained it many times. It is, there are 6 operational axes right now. 6. Russia can open additional 1 or 2 if she decides to. And this is all about stretching the reserves. And there is very little really remaining there. And that is why when they begin to talk about yet another counteroffensive, it's like, as my friend Vladimir, Scott knows Vladimir, so, and he says, Russians have the problem. Russians still want to sit in the strategic defense, but each time they sit, the Ukrainians just abandon yet another thing, so they have to move, you know, ahead again. So, and it's like they oh, please, just can we stop this? But the point is, again, I know it sounds horrible, but that's the strategy, and it works brilliantly. The slaughter continues, and I looked up today losses again in accordance to Russian Defense Ministry, and again, you can easily multiply them by 2. So we have the situation with another 2,040 killed and wounded in a day, yesterday. And we're looking at now what they officially confirmed 50 Western advisors being, you know, Mr. Kinjal visited them. So, and you don't want to, you know, visits by Mr. Kinjal. So, and there's some Spanish guy, I mean, the retired colonel or something like that, he's now lamenting that he lost his friends and, you know, from NATO in Odessa. They said there was a strike on Odessa, and yeah, there are a bunch of, you know, there are American, British, and French, other people there. So it continues, yeah, just steady, you know, traditional.
Question real quick before we go to Scott. I'm hearing about people in Chasiv Yar
Mhm.
And how important. I understand that that is a very, very critical point. What's happening in Chasiv Yar, and why is that such an important town?
Well, even Ukrainians admit now that the situation there, I don't remember the numbers of the brigades there, but it really doesn't matter. They are critical. And there have been inspection there by one guy from the general staff of Ukraine, and it's an absolute disaster. They have companies which have only 5 people. So that's pretty much. And Chasiv Yar is essentially the logistical anchor, the hub for the practically the whole, part of the front. And so there you go. And what can I say? It's inevitable. It's like, it's just inevitable.
Scott, same thing with you. Your thoughts on current, before we move on to other things, the current state of conflict on the battlefield. Certainly, we can't predict any times or anything like that. But how do you see things going on right now from your vantage point?
Well, I mean, I'll just second everything Andrei said. Just to again focus in on Chasiv Yar, the Ukrainians have a handful, maybe 6 go-to brigades that they move around the front to plug up holes, to launch localized counterattacks, etc. And one of these is the 47th Brigade. It's a mechanized unit. It was supposed to help lead off the 2023 counteroffensive. It was equipped with the Leopard, with the Bradleys. Didn't fare so well, but it's taken heavy casualties, but it also, I mean, they've been very good with their Bradleys. The 47th on occasion launches some very effective counterattacks, localized. They've learned how to use their Bradleys and how to make that 25 millimeter Bushmaster sing. So they were down in, I guess, in the Zaporizhia area, and they were supposed to be heading up to Chasiv Yar because Chasiv Yar is in crisis. And I guess the Russians found them at the train station with their equipment loaded on the trains, their manpower concentrated. They hit them with 2 Iskanders. I don't have an equipment count, but it's supposed to be significant. And easily a battalion of that brigade was taken out of the fight just with that strike. And this gutted, because these were the guys that were absolutely required to launch counterattacks in Chasiv Yar, either on the flanks or directly to push the Russians back. And we should be clear, and I think Andrei will second this. The Ukrainians are able to achieve, isolated elements of tactical superiority. They flood the zone with drones. I mean, nothing demoralizes the Russians more than when the Ukrainian drones break through, meaning that the Russian electronic warfare is swamped. Their ability to shoot down is swamped, and now the FPV drones are literally free roaming in a sector of the front. It's devastating for the Russians because it's instant death. If you're seen, you die. And the Ukrainians have inflicted, again, in isolated occasions, heavy casualties on the Russians using the FPV drones. And the 47th works very well with these drone units. And so this, by the Iskanders hitting the 47th the way they did, it takes the air out of the sail of the Ukrainians. And so Chasiv Yar could very well fall, and then that opens it up to Kramatorsk, I believe, is the next city down the line. It's I think when it folds, you're going to start to see an unraveling of the lines as the Ukrainians lose logistical sustainability and things of that nature. So it's a very critical battle for the Russians. But as Andrei said, the Russians are advancing steadily. I mean, everywhere. And they're going between 6 kilometers a day to 1.5 kilometers a day to a kilometer a day. But the bottom line is they're moving. And it breaks up the Ukrainians traditionally dig in on tree lines and go deep. And then they make the Russians come and dig them out. And then, as I said, the Russians will dig them out, but then the Ukrainians come in hard with FPV drones and push the Russians back, recapture the tree line, and there's to and fro, and that's the way it's gone. That's not happening now. The Ukrainians are being thrown out, and they aren't aren't able to counterattack, so they have to go and set up. And as Andrei said, the Russians normally want to dig in and let them come, but the Ukrainians aren't coming. They're making the Russians go to them. And the Russians are. If you do something long enough, you develop a skill set. And I think the Russians are learning how to do the localized advance very well. This isn't Big Arrow stuff. This isn't World War II, Zhukov stuff. This is modern day Ukraine, going 300 meters down the road, taking that tree line, which sounds a lot easier than it is. Modern war, the Ukrainians are very good troops. They're very good. They know how to set up defensive fires. They know how to lay rapid minefields. They know how to use the weapons that they have. And if the Russians make a mistake, the Russians will die. And that has slowed the Russians down in the past because they have made mistakes. They're not making that many mistakes right now, and they're just steadily pushing because the Ukrainians are running out of manpower. They're literally, they've got nothing left. And to do half the stuff we talked about the Ukrainians doing, they have to not just use manpower, but trained manpower. They don't have that anymore. It's they're starting to bring in people in from Europe that they've been training, but we're talking, a battalion, a company, a battalion. And as we said, you're losing a brigade a day. So these guys, their life expectancy is null. On Zelensky, just to pull back a little bit, I don't know what – I mean, he's now talking about peace plan, and the West is jumping on this. And it's always interesting. The moment Zelensky starts talking peace and the West jumps on it, suddenly everybody's saying, well, Putin is suing for peace. Putin is weak. This is a reflection of Russian weakness. I haven't seen Putin sue for peace yet. I've heard them say that we're open to talking about this, but there's major preconditions, like you have to deal with the reality as it is. And I've also seen the Russians, hardening their stance. Lavrov says some interesting things about how Ukraine will never again govern over places where there are Russian populations that have been subjected to abuse. That is literally the definition of Odessa. That is literally the definition of Kharkov. So I think anybody who's talking about a negotiated end that Zelensky is going to do, first of all, Russia won't talk to Zelensky. They've made that clear too. So the West is going to have to solve the Zelensky problem before they even begin to do it. The other thing is Russia's not in a negotiating mood. I don't know what Donald Trump thinks he's going to do. I don't know what kind of conversations he's been having with Boris Johnson and with Zelensky and with others. I can't say with 100% certainty I know what the Russians are going to do, but I would put a lot of money on the following bet that Russia is not going to give up Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk. That just isn't going to happen. And I'll put even more money on the bet that Ukraine will not control Odessa, Kharkov, Dnipropetrovsk, and Mykolaiv at a minimum. There might be Sumy might be thrown in there as well. The longer this goes on, the worse off it is for Ukraine. Anybody in the West who's thinking that there's going to be a negotiated settlement now, that Russia's somehow looking for a way out of this, Russia's just looking to kill more Ukrainians. Russia, I just wrote something that talked about this shift in mindset just over the course of a year. Russia's becoming not just harder, but coarse isn't the right word because the Russians are refined. I'm not saying that they're coarse, but there used to be like empathy for the Ukrainians. There used to be like, man, we don't want to do this. Right now, the Russians I'm seeing or talking to are just like, kill them. We don't care anymore. Kill them. They're not going to murder them. They're not going to commit war crimes. But the day of feeling sorry for the Ukrainians is long past. Russia's no longer feeling sorry for Ukraine. Ukraine is going to get what it deserves in the mind of the Russians. And this is a mentality that the West hasn't grasped onto. When Russia used to show empathy, I think the West said that's weakness. And the West still somehow labors under the notion that Russia is weak, that Putin is desperate. There's no desperation on the part of the Russians. There is just a very stone cold determination to get this job done. And the calendar doesn't factor in. What factors in is accomplishing the objective. So that would be my take on it.
I want to go with something else, but before we do, I do want to ask you this, Andre. You know, when you guys say, okay, there were some Westerns in there and they got bopped with a couple of Iskander missiles, right? Okay. To the layman here, that would be me. I don't have a concept of that. You know what I mean? I have a concept of a grenade or a mortar, but I understand that's big. To people that don't know anything about, you know, a missile, a concept of a missile strike, what kind of power, what kind of force, what kind of explosion, if I'm in my if it hits in my community with houses and stuff like that, how can you explain what a strike from a couple of Iskanders will look like to people who don't have, you know, just how the level of power and damage that these things will do for those of us who don't know anything about a missile strike?
Before I go, I want to stress how beautifully Scott captured the shift in the mood. Russians don't care how many Ukrainians they will kill now. It's over. There is no brotherly nation. But now about Iskander. Iskander has two types of munitions. One of them is cluster munition, and another almost 500 kilogram high explosive warhead. It's half a ton of the, you know, very high explosive. So when this thing blows, I mean, it's, let me put it this way: you don't want to be anywhere near this, about 1,000 feet, and even there you will have the, you know, concussion and, you know, things of this nature, but you probably will survive. So the strikes also, it's high precision weapon. Is extremely precise. It has the guidance, which is the inertial navigational system, which is very advanced. It's laser gyroscopes and things of this nature. It has depending on the trajectory, it can actually do the celestial correction, and of course it's GLONASS driven. So by the time it hits you, the CAP, the circular error probable, is about between 3 to 10 meters. Okay. So if you are even in the dugout, let's say the platoon or company control post, and the control post is more than just some dugout. It's the whole system of the, you know, the fortification, so to speak, trenches, things of this nature. There are all kinds of things which are go there. So when it hits precisely at the command post itself, where people are congregating. It also can carry the high penetration warhead, which means you can be somewhere in the bunker, okay? I don't know. I know how Kinzhal can reach, for example, 50 meters depth. Well, Kinzhal is a sort of development of the Iskander, but much more advanced. But if Kinzhal can do it so I would assume even if you like 10 meters underground in the bunker, they will still get it. So at this stage, what is called RUK or ROK, which is, of course, разведывательно-ударный комплекс or разведывательно-огневой complex, which is, of course, the recon strike complex or recon fire complex, depending on the type of munition. So it's all about where you are and recon. Once you know that, okay, we have the collection of the Ukrainian or Western NATO officers here in this building somewhere in the middle of Kiev or in Kharkov or somewhere in the field elsewhere. The moment you have, that takes a couple minutes to introduce the coordinates, the develop firing solution, you know, and especially if you're already in the what is called походная, which means they're ready to transportation mode. That means you just go in, get, you know, things, you just do geodesic, you know, topographic tie in, which is today, it's all computerized, you know, you just lift those two and off they go, two of them. So by the time they arrive, they are hypersonic essentially, Iskanders. And their burnout speed is about Mach 6.5, something like that. So it's over.
Let me ask you this, something that you know, a lot of people are concerned with their fear, escalation, nuclear conflict, things of that nature, right? Mm-hmm. Lately, I've been reading this. Orban has said this, and now Vucic said this, that, you know, the West, NATO wants to, thinks they can go to, well, I don't know if you read this, but Serbian leader said, these people are crazy and they think they're planning to go to war with Russia, blah, blah, blah. Well, I looked, for the most part, I mean, Britain and these countries, A, they got nothing. B, here's the other thing. I was listening to Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, and he says, I've talked to some of the European leaders, and I've said, if they're sending men to fight in Ukraine, how many would you send? He said, everyone I've asked said 0 because my government would fall. The people wouldn't stand it.
Yeah.
But I think it seems that you've got leaders that are kind of lean. You got this crazy Estonia woman now that's supposed to be in charge of whatever the hell. Estonia, I think the community I live in is bigger, and probably has, like the neighborhood watch probably is every bit as powerful as the Estonian military, but at any rate, your thoughts on this talk about NATO getting involved. They can't get the troops there. I mean, the talk about Vučić, Orban about NATO, seeing where that's going, talking about getting involved. Your thoughts?
The only country which can involve itself to any effect is still going to lose, but it's United States. It's superpower, still remains superpower. It's definitely lost a lot of shining, so to speak, to it, but it's still, it has a significant force and things of this nature, despite the fact that, it will not be able to deploy it to Europe. As per Europe, any staff which is not completely, brainwashed, and I don't believe many military professionals in NATO and in Brussels are completely nut jobs. Any staff will start planning operation. Guess what? By calculating a required force. This is the first thing they will do. They need to have the force design, as done in the, guidance on the employment of force. And they have methods, they have models. So what kind of force they can provide? I quote my friends, Russian military, who said, we do not even sweat about European NATO. They can do stupid things, like, and precipitate some very unpleasant thing. But NATO in Europe literally have no required force to survive for 3 days in their real battle. How can you where would you deploy them? It's just military nonsense. The only thing they can do is if they have United States backing, but United States now not in a shape to do anything about it. So, and when you look at this, it's much talk about nothing really. Again, they can, theoretically British, they can send a company, mighty British army, and I quote here Doug McGregor, they have Lilliputian force. If you think that the French are better, well, why don't they provide those Leclerc tanks, Russian, So, and that's pretty much it. What can I say? It's complete stupidity. It's a lot of fluffy talk. That's it.
Scott, your thoughts on the lunatics discussion about getting involved as Ukraine falls. The guy from Poland, which they've got 300,000 people, he talks the most. He's like, yes, if it looks like Ukraine's going to fall, which they already know the story, then we might have to get involved. And I'm thinking, Poland, really? You got 300,000 people? You can't protect your own border? What the hell? You know what I mean? And you've given 90% of your stuff already over there. And you weren't the best fighters in the first place.
The sound.
Oh, can you hear me?
Sound.
I can hear. Can you hear me, Scott?
Something is not working.
Scott's hearing me.
Can you hear me, Andrei?
Strange. I don't receive sound.
Yeah, you know what? Why don't I?
Okay, guys, let me re-log in, re-enter this.
That's probably going to solve the problem. Can you hear me, Garland?
Okay. Yes, loud and clear. Hopefully Andrei comes right back on. Okay. On all this talk of escalation.
Well, Andrei pointed out, he said there's no NATO staff that will tolerate this. I learned this the hard way. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was put in charge as a lieutenant for our annual training plan, because I had the gumption to tell the battalion commander that intelligence drives operations. And so, can you hear us now, Andrei?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful.
And so the commander said, okay, then you get to write and execute the annual training plan, because he just fired the S3, because the S3 and I had a fight over the staffing principles. But I came up with this great plan, and it was all focused on, howitzer batteries moving and all this kind of stuff. And I went in there and I briefed the plan, and you could just see the smirk on everybody's face as I'm briefing the plan, because it is the perfect lieutenant plan. I mean, because lieutenants are really experienced. And the major, the S4, is just sitting there. You just, hey, Lieutenant, where's your fuel coming from? Fuel? You mean, yeah, the howitzers you're moving. When they start running out of gas, what are you going to do? Well, I guess I have to get gas. Where's that in your plan? And now ammunition. When they shoot their basic load on basically, day one, where's the ammunition coming from? Ammunition? Yeah, you're going to need ammo. Well, it's in the depot. Very good, Lieutenant. You're learning. Now, how are you going to get the ammo from the depot to the howitzers? Trucks. Very good, Lieutenant. You're work with me on this one. And you see, I had to learn about logistics, that nothing happens unless. And then I had to do the same thing. I was on General Gray, the Commandant, put together this team, and we planned an amphibious assault during the Gulf War, because Schwarzkopf wanted Marines to lead a frontal assault that we ended up doing anyways. But planning the amphibious assault, I remembered I got to have trucks and tanks and all this stuff. And so we did something where we're going to combat load ships and move off. But the planning that went into just getting a regiment ashore, and then before you talked about bringing in another regiment, you had to have the logistics for that assault. Logistics was 80% of the plan. All the arrows and the sexy stuff, forget that. Logistics, that's all it is. It's all about logistics. Nobody in NATO has the fuel, the ammunition, or the trucks to do this. For the Poles to say, we want to do something, it's something that I learned right off the bat. If you have a division with its organic transport, as you move that division away from its base of operations forward, you are literally increasing exponentially the amount of trucks necessary. And if the division doesn't have the trucks, the division ain't going nowhere, because the trucks are designed to resupply within the area of the division's operations. As you move forward, those trucks have to go backwards to pick stuff up, and now they're not operating here. So you got to have more trucks. Where are they coming from? If you don't have core level transportation units earmarked and ready, and we don't do that anymore. We stopped doing that a long time ago. And then if you're not able to jump the depots for the fuel, that requires even more vehicles. If you look at the NATO infrastructure, they don't have the trucks. They don't have any of the things you need to move a core forward. In the Gulf War, I remember when we were talking about the great, Hail Mary movement, that Schwarzkopf was going to shift, the forces over, they're going to outflank. In order to make that happen, we actually had to go, we being the U.S., had to go park entire truck fleets in the middle of the desert and just leave them there. And we had to do that on a couple occasions, just park them there. Why? Because as the units made that move, they had to give birth to more trucks. Now, the reason why I know about this is because we were trying to come with the Marine Corps about assault breaching, and we were running out of options. We didn't have enough MICLICs and all this stuff. And suddenly one of our recon units come by, hey, there's a whole bunch of trucks in the middle of the desert. And the combat engineers went, give me 20. So we stole 20 Army trucks. We put a lot of high explosive on them. We ran them through the minefields to blow them up. And after the war, the Army was like, where did our trucks go? And we all forgot about it. But the point is, the Army had a whole bunch of trucks out there. They needed them. We don't have those trucks. Poland doesn't have those trucks. You know who does? You know who's become sort of specialized in this? The Russians. They become very good at combat logistics. I spoke, Opti Aladanov is somebody I've spent a lot of time with and talking to. And he says the learning curve, what Russia's learned about logistics, combat logistics. He went to the General Staff Academy, and This is a guy who is a frontline combat commander, and most of the time he's spending there was about logistics, because that's the reality of war. If you can't master logistics, you can't do anything else, and NATO cannot do the logistics. This is why France will never send any more than 2,000 forces out into Romania and beyond, because they cannot logistically sustain that. Poland cannot punch a division across into Ukraine. They can't logistically sustain that. The United States is incapable of turning that force it has into an offensive force because it can't logistically sustain it. Offensive operations burn through logistics at a far greater rate than defensive operations. NATO is incapable of sustained large-scale offensive operations. Any talk about NATO doing anything to Russia on the ground is absurd. NATO would be solely using its air force and its long-range strike capabilities. They might enjoy a day or two of good luck. They'll get some Russian targets, but then that's it. Russia will dial in their electronic warfare, dial in their air defense, and that's it. Then NATO lost all of its advantage, and it loses. This is what I would tell the Serbian leader and the Hungarian leader: take a chill pill. I know you guys are scared because you're looking at plans. You're looking at people talking. It ain't going to happen. None of that's going to happen. It can't happen. That's the reality.
Andrei, something I want to ask you about. Two things, and I hope you're familiar with them. I've reported on both of them. Number one, a delegation, a military delegation, including the deputy chief for the military, just showed up in North Korea. And Russia today, or in the process of signing a comprehensive strategic partnership with Iran. It seems something's going on. They're building something. What do you think about those two things?
It's reinforcing the BRICS realm, if you wish. And obviously there are potential hotspots are North Korea and especially Iran, especially considering the fact that Israel is just being mauled as we speak. So who knows what kind of nut jobs will decide, to do something about it. Iran is a strategic partner of Russia, so it is only natural for Russia, military people to be involved in some form in Iran, and especially so in North Korea, which now it's becoming Russia's, flank against the, let's call it what they call it now. The Biden administration called it the Asian NATO, as they called it. So yeah, you have to arm and upgrade North Korea, no doubt about it. So make sure that they have a reach, to Japan, obviously. And we're talking about good reach. We're talking about high precision reach, which can also reach U.S. naval bases in Yokosuka, Okinawa, and things of this nature. So it is all, this is the posture. Nobody wants to go to war. But you know what? If you have to, you have to deter. And same goes for Iran, but Iran already, it's an even larger project, because in this case, we're talking about, there was a rumor that the first two Su-35s for Iranian air forces have been delivered actually half a year ago. So there's something going on there, and it's obviously which makes Israel very unhappy. And well, United States too. So it's totally normal development. It's totally normal upgrade of the, well, it's not fringe. Well, geographically, they are sort of fringes for the large Eurasian economic space for cooperation and economic development. So, and knowing that potentially we have what? There are many people in Washington who are still dreaming about, unleashing the war, for Taiwan. So although China was on record and actions actually speak about it, that they say we don't want to, capture Taiwan, but they are trying to corral them the same way as they tried to corral Russia in response in Ukraine. Russia for 8 years was dodging all those attempts, but then of course when Russia felt ready, she pounced, so to speak, and we know the result today. So the same probably they're trying to do with China. But I mean, that is going to be, I don't even want to, think about it, because it's going to be the huge fire all over Pacific Ocean, and nobody wants that, except for the nut jobs in Washington who still think that United States is hegemon and, absolutely untouchable. There are people like that. They believe that, and they act upon the very wrong, very delusional assumption that United States can go in and win the war with China and thus saved its own status as hegemon. But it's too late, too little, and it's better be not done, because obviously China is not going to be alone. China will be supported, as I already stated. There is a North Korea, there is Russia, all kind of geographic vicinity, all common borders, all common logistical connections there, So, and as a result, good luck trying to do something about it, So.
Scott, Russian delegation in North Korea. Russia signs comprehensive partnership with Iran. Your thoughts?
Well, I'll just second everything that Andrei said about North Korea. This is a strategic relationship designed to stop the tripartite, arrangements that the United States was making with South Korea and Japan to hold in check what NATO is calling the IP4, Indo-Pacific Four. Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia. Couldn't pick four countries further separated from each other with big Chinese, presence in the middle. Geopolitically, not too smart. North Korea is, I think there's the one that has caught my eye is with Iran. And I just go back to when, Russia's response. Remember when when the ATACMS blew up over the Crimea beach? And the Russians said, there will come, it's like the Godfather, there will come a time when I call you and, you're going to have to do something. Russia said, look, we're going to be arming people around the world with advanced weapons that will target the United States and its allies. This is what will happen because of what you have done. Now we look at the Houthis striking Tel Aviv, expanding their operations, and then Israel's genius response into hitting the oil fields. Or whoever is doing the Israeli planning should be, I can't say shot, but fired. Maybe shot, because it's just bad. They literally don't understand that the Houthi sucked them into a trap. Because look at the first thing Russia said afterwards. And understand, Russia doesn't do anything knee-jerk reaction. Russia's working with Iran on how to find the spot where to insert the weaponry that will have a strategic ability, put the thumb on the scale. Russia doesn't need to fly IL-76s in the Sanaa. They're not going to. Iran already supplies Yemen with weapons. Iran already has that logistics figured out. All that Russia has to do is insert the weapons into the stream. But Russia now needs a political hook. And look at the first thing Russia said afterwards. I think it was Lavrov at the Security Council. Russia will not be an observer indefinitely. And, we are going to eventually be brought in. I think that decision's been made. I think that there's a classified annex to this strategic relationship document that they're signing with Iran that talks about the Russians providing the Houthi with advanced weaponry. It's already been figured out. The weapons may be there already. The Israelis are gloating that they've solved this problem. Those primitive drones will never hit again. I think you're going to see in the not so distant future Israel being hit with very advanced weapons coming out of Yemen that Israel doesn't have a solution for. And I think you're going to see shipping in the Red Sea, in the Gulf of Aden, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, likewise being interdicted with some advanced weaponry. And Iran may up the scale too and provide some of the more. But the bottom line is I think the Houthi are going to get a big upgrade, courtesy of Mother Russia. And I think that to me is the thing that I'm looking at right now, because I do think the Russians have, like I said, I mean, it's part of the hardening. I've seen it with Anatoly Antonov, the ambassador. A year ago, he was talking about how to fight Russophobia in the United States, how to reach out and have this common dialogue with the American people. Today, he's like, screw you. I don't care. Russia's going to kick your ass. He doesn't say, he's more diplomatic than that, but, that's his approach. It's just a very hard approach. And I think we're seeing that now. Russia's tired of playing, stupid reindeer games, and they're rewriting the rules, and it's not going to be to the benefit of the United States and its allies. Israel is going to find the war going into a different gear, and the United States will be facing the same problem. We don't have a solution. We already proved we can't stop the weapons that the Houthi have right now, and when they get that upgrade, we can't touch those either.
Well, I mean, I read about the Houthi the drone, and it went through, according to reports, Israel's layered air defense, which is U.S. air defenses. And I saw the video, right? And its thing sounded like it had a 2-cycle engine. I saw the video, and it's like, wham! I'm like, okay. And of course, Israel then bombed Yemen. And of course, see, that's the problem with bombing Yemen. Yemen's answer was, hooray! Now we get to engage with Israel. We've been praying for this time. How are you going to fight somebody that when you bomb them, their answer is, we've been praying for the opportunity to engage with you? They got bombed by the Saudis for the last 5 years. The British genocided them and did everything they could. They ain't doing. Scott, Andrei, I'll ask you about Yemen and all that, but let me add this. I read a lot. One of the things I saw today was that the Iranians apparently launched 2 satellites from Roscosmos Space Center, and they said they were agriculture. I have a funny feeling they didn't have anything to do with agriculture. How, for those of us, we look at it and say, okay, missiles or this or that. And when I see a couple of satellites take off, I think to myself, well, how important could satellites be? I mean, how does that change the game? I think they're probably military related. How critical are those satellites? How can that change the game by satellites? And also your thoughts on the Middle East and Russia's position in there with what's going on. But those satellites, I want to know, do they really change anything with targeting, things of that nature, and how?
Absolutely critical. We need to know, I need to look up their orbits. I have to look it up. There are many websites which track the satellites, and by the orbit, you already can tell pretty much, okay, yeah, that's agricultural, all right?
Yeah.
It's absolutely critical to have the targeting. It's absolutely critical also the fight the obsolescence of the targeting, that you receive the targeting by the time you do something, the target already moved somewhere and something happened. So you need to have this real life. And what Scott mentioned very correctly, between Russians and Iran, there will be classified parts of those things. The strategic, partnership and things of this nature. And I can, bet on the fact that one of the positions which will be discussed there, that Russia will be using its ISR capabilities, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, especially with now growing satellite constellation, which now can produce almost 24/7 targeting for their, the conventional weapons in the primarily northern hemisphere. So yeah, that Iran will be also getting the targeting from Russians, which will be very precise and very timely. So that is the part of it. So the Iran launching those satellites by means of Russian rocket, I understand. So yeah, it's absolutely critical. And, there is now anecdote, the funny story in Russian, which goes like that. Well, hello, Houthis, but we're not Houthis, we're Chechens. Now you are, so so it is just like that, so absolutely critical. In the truth of the matter, since late 1970s to 1980s, this has become tactical and operational treason. If I see you, I will kill you. I can hit you. And it grows more and more important, as the time goes by. So that is why so much is based around the not allowing the enemy to provide targeting, And that brings us to, for example, European theater of operation. If we go back a little bit, which Scott beautifully described in terms of and Iraqi experience and things of this nature, that you cannot put anything larger than a company in statically anywhere. You just can't. It will get hit by Kinjal, or Zircon will fly in, or something like that. And again, remember, just the regiment size mechanized force, it's roughly 190 flatbed rail cars. Okay, around 190. Okay, this is a big echelon, and this is just the most of its hardware. And so when you look at this, that's when your satellite constellations comes in play. It gives you 24/7 real life, targeting on pretty much everything. And of course, then we employ the other issue is employing other means of reconnaissance, from drones to something else altogether. So, and there you go. Even human intel matters, great deal actually. So,
let me ask you this, Scott. I wanted to ask you about this. The people who run this country are absolutely, right now, the Blinken Sullivan people are absolutely freaking insane. And one of the things they're talking about is putting intermediate nukes in Germany. Now, I read today, putting some more missiles in Germany. What I've read today is that there are some German members of parliament that are like, whoa, there's some of the German politicians are like, whoa, hold on here. We don't want to be targets. Your thoughts about that whole thing, this discussion of putting, nukes in Germany, et cetera. And as I said, the Germans, I think when it comes to blowing up Nord Stream, they've kept their mouth shut. But there seem to be some Germans, they're really getting stirred about this, saying they ain't so thrilled about it.
Yeah, let's talk about the Germans for a second. Back in the Cold War, when the United States and NATO were doing their plans, it was determined early on that they couldn't stop the Russians up front, and that the best thing to do, because you have to buy time for reforger to kick in, for the troops to land, fall on their equipment, move into the deployment. And so they had the initial fighting position. I remember when we first moved to Germany, we lived in a little village called Charlottenbach, and it was beautiful pastoral village, cows. I mean, my God, wonderful. But then they did Autumn Forge, extended into the wintertime. And all of a sudden there was American tanks churning up the fields. Every forest had, Americans lined up. And it was the 8th Infantry Division flying in. And this was their forward fighting position. This is what they were planning to do. They would marry up, and this is where they were supposed to go. And I'm like, but the border's that way. Well, no, the border isn't going to be there anymore. The Soviets are going to advance, and this is where they were going to stop them, right in the beautiful little village of Charlottenbach. And suddenly it wasn't a good idea to be living in Charlottenbach. But the point is, that was the American plan. The Germans, meanwhile, are going, 9. That ain't going to happen. Because the American plan was not just about giving up territory, but using tactical nuclear weapons to slow the Soviets down. And the Germans are going, you guys do know that when that goes off, it's going off on German soil, not East German soil, West German soil. And we got West German farmers that are farming that right now who aren't very happy about this. And they're saying 9. And so we say 9. So we're coming up with what we call the forward defense. And so the Germans said, we're saying, and we're fighting to the bitter end, right at the front line, and you better be there with us. And, the 11th Cavalry up in Fulda Gap was like, wait a minute, we were looking forward to falling back and living. And now you're telling us that we have to die in place on the front line. And the answer was yes. That was the Germany. Now, when we brought in so I brought that up because the Germans aren't too thrilled about the concept of nuclear war on their soil. It's in their DNA, not before. When we were talking about bringing the INS system in, NATO command was like, we have to do this. America, we have to do this. The Germans are going, no, you don't. You really don't have to do this. We don't want them on our soil. We don't want the Persians on our soil. We don't want the Glickums. We don't want any of this on our soil. And in 1982, in October 1982, the German government fell. A lot of people don't realize that the decision to introduce INF weapon system created a political crisis that caused the coalition to split and the German government fell. Today, we're in a situation where there's some institutional memory in Germany. It's one of the things that I'm happy about. The same German farmers are going, I thought we had this INF treaty that said those weapons no longer existed. And now you're telling me you're bringing the weapons back. Why? Oh, because America withdrew from the INF treaty. That's not a good thing. And so now the Americans withdrew, not because of Europe anyways. They withdrew because of China. They withdrew because they were upset about Chinese intermediate range weapons, but now they're coming in here. And the Russians said, okay, just don't deploy them to Europe. But then the Americans did anyways. And so now the Russians are going to be putting their own systems up. And I'll get to that in a second. But the point is, these systems that are coming in, the SM-6, the Typhoon, it's a short-range missile, not to be worried about, conventional. The ground-launched cruise missile, 1,800-mile range, nuclear capable. Worry about that. But the one that's the most problematic is the Dark Eagle, a hypersonic missile. Now, it was supposed to have been deployed last year, but America has problems with hypersonics. And we're still going through the test phase. But the Army's convinced that they'll be able to get this deployed into Europe in 2026. Understand that we go back to the same problem that we had in the 1980s. The Pershing II was one of the most destabilizing weapons of its time. Why? Because when it was fired, 7 to 12 minutes later, it would hit the Kremlin with a nuclear warhead, eliminating, people need to study up on nuclear. When we talk about nuclear posture, both sides have a plan. You've heard the Russian plan. We will use it as deterrence, but we will use this. But what they never talk, and we have the similar kind of plan. No one talks about the protocols. The decision cycle protocols. It's written down, the protocol. Alert, boom. Briefcase is open. Communications are established. You have a very limited time. It's written in the damn protocol. I hope I'm not giving away too much. It's written in the damn protocol how much time you have to talk the president out of this or to confirm this. And this is, all these protocols are written on the assumption of 15 to 30-minute warning time. 15 minutes for submarine launched ballistic missiles, 30 minutes for ICBMs. And so the idea is that the president now can make orders, boom, with enough buffer that the missiles will go away before everybody dies. That's the idea. The protocols aren't written for 3 to 6 minutes. There is no protocol for a 3 to 6 minute, conferring. And that's what you get with the Pershing II. You eliminate any conference, which means you take away the ability to react to a mistake, to say, wait, time out. Give me 5 more minutes for the radar guys to confirm that that's not a flock of seagulls, that is in fact an ICBM launch. I'm sorry, sir, it's a flock of seagulls. Whew, stand down. No, when you have INF systems able to strike the Russian capital, please, people, listen to what I'm saying. The Russian capital. Not the America's sitting there with their 2 big oceans going, we don't have to. The Russian capital. Now, the Russians are saying, whoa, they can strike our capital. What do we have to do in response? Go to Able Archer 83. It was a NATO command post exercise where the Russians actually thought we were preparing to launch a preemptive nuclear strike. They put their SS-20 mobile missile units on alert. They have aircraft on the runway with nuclear weapons attached with launch orders to go. And had they thought for a moment that the United States and NATO was going to launch this attack, those weapons would have gone and we would have died. Now, here's another thing. People say, well, it's going to only be limited to Europe. Don't worry, Scott. Do you guys, what part of the Russian capital don't you understand? You see, America's like, well, we can give up a couple European cities. Russia's not going to give up a single Russian city. The second you start knocking off Russian territory, the United States disappears. That's the way it works. It automatically escalates to that level. And so now we're putting the Dark Eagle in. Russia said that it's, even though the United States withdrew from the treaty, they're not going to produce INF systems unless we deploy them. Well, last September, we deployed them. So now Russia is starting to do this. Now, people say, well, Scott, don't they have to go through that whole research and development phase and it takes long? No, they've already done that, you see. In 2015, they were ready to deploy what's known as the RS-26, the Rubiège. There's a small ICBM, a two-stage variant of the Yars missile. But it was funny because if you operate with one warhead, and by the way, the warhead is an avant-garde hypersonic warhead, nuclear capable, it could go ICBM ranges. But if you put 3 warheads on it, it was now an INF system. And Russia would have been compelled to commit to one or the other. And the Russians are looking at Americans talking about getting out of the INF treaty, and the Russians are saying, time out, go time out on this system, pull it back. We're not going to declare it. You don't have to declare it because they didn't do 20 launches, so they can hold this into a research phase. And it's there. I've been to Vodkinsk. I worked at Vodkinsk. I know how Vodkinsk works. Vodkinsk is used to, for instance, having the SS-25 3-stage intercontinental ballistic missile being produced in parallel with the SS-20, which is basically the first 2 stages of the SS-25. Same skill set. You can run them through. You can crank out 60 of one, 80 of the other simultaneously. Vodkinsk is producing the Yars today, the Yars Road Mobile Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. Vodkinsk can instantly, right now, on demand, produce the RS-26 Rubij on demand, which means that before we even get the Dark Eagle deployed, Russia will have, I believe, at least 3 regiments of now that's 3 regiments. It's 9 missile launchers per regiment, 3 warheads. So that's 9. I'm simple Marine, 9, 18, 27 times 3, which is avant-garde. That's 60 plus 21. That's 81 European cities that'll be wiped off the face of the earth, or European command posts, because these are avant-garde nuclear capable. The Russians will deploy them. Now the Dark Eagle shows up. And everybody's going, okay, these are just weapons. Let's go back to what I talked about, hair trigger. The Russians will be looking at the Dark Eagle. If there is a miscalculation, a mistake, a misfire, the protocol for the Russians doesn't exist. There is no Russian protocol that gives Putin the chance to confer over the course of 5 minutes. There is no 5-minute protocol. Ladies and gentlemen, I know this. There is no 5-minute protocol, which means the Russians default to one of 2 things. Preemptive strike, which means that they're not going to wait to detect. The second they think something's happened, they're going to go ahead and launch those 81 avant-gardes and take out all the targets. Or launch on detection, meaning that the second they detect, they launch. But again, once they make that decision to launch, it's not just going to be the 81 cities. They are now committed to take out the American strategic force too. So they're going to be firing everything they can at the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, we are literally on the cusp of a world-ending nuclear conflict between the United States and Russia. The last remaining arms control treaty, the New START treaty, expires February 4th of 2026. We have 2 presidential candidates, Trump and Kamala Harris, neither of whom are talking about arms control, neither of whom are talking about anything. None of them are saying, hey, deploying Dark Eagle is stupid. Ironically, it's going to come down to the German people, the German farmer. Can the Germans once again say 9 to this insanity? Can they rise up? Can they make a German government fall? Can they block this deployment? If they can, there's hope. If not, and we don't get a candidate to say, hey, maybe arms controls was what we should be doing. We shouldn't be. We have lowered the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons, both us and Russia. The NATO is talking about taking 24 of the B-61 bombs that we have stationed, nuclear bombs, and putting them on operational standby. Now, understand what this means. If they're on operational standby, that means that every single nuclear-capable aircraft in the NATO inventory, every F-35A, every F-16, when it takes off, has to be treated by Russia as carrying a nuclear bomb. Russia has no choice but to say that is a nuclear-capable aircraft, and now they adjust again. And now if NATO's dumb enough to take off 3 F-35s from an airfield that could have nuclear weapons and fly them aggressively towards the Russian border, and at the same time a flock of seagulls sets off a radar, the Russians are going to say, go. And it's all over. We all die. That's how close we are to absolute disaster here. And yet every American, we're talking about the wrong things. We are literally talking about the wrong things.
Andrei.
No, I agree with most what Scott said. The only thing which is working right now, it's a mitigation of the issue because S500 and S550, which is a mobile version of A235 Nudol, are in serial production. So it is a mitigating factor, but the point is, of course, you don't have to even go for Rubesh, actually. You can, and Scott absolutely correct that Rubesh is basically ready if need be. But it's much simpler to, which is already happening, to it's not only development, it's going to be procured fairly soon. Land launched Zircon. Zircon already flies. It flies from the what is called Bastion complex, which actually flew before that. They would launch P-800 Onyx missiles. But Zircon, with its first version, has the radius of 1,500 kilometers. So if you have, for example, the Bastion, which you do, I believe there are 2 brigades of that, which is called BRAV, Coastal Artillery Missile Forces. So that means you can easily reach from Kaliningrad alone practically every place in Europe. And then, of course, what you do, you add one single 1 meter long block to Iskander. And it suddenly goes from 500 kilometers range to something around 2,500 kilometer range. Okay. So, and yeah, there are so many things to respond, but here is the issue, which I and Larry, we discussed it also in somewhat depth, and not only in Anglophone sphere, we spoke about it with my friend Vera, and Russia is building strategic anti-missile defense, which is something totally out of this world. And so just to give you an example, S500, S550, and S300V4, they are all systems designed to not only stop ballistic missiles, and S500 and S550 are designed to stop intercontinental ballistic missiles. And these are Minuteman III and Trident 2D5. They are designed to shoot down maneuvering hypersonic targets. And they already confirmed this capability. And in this respect, it is the mitigating factor which should be also kept in mind, despite the fact that, yeah, it was Trump, I believe, who quit INF Treaty because he was told that, oh yeah, it's so easy to create gliding body. Well, it's not. So then now you have the Europeans who come out and say, we are about NATO, about 20 years before we actually will be able to produce the operational hypersonic weapon. And they talk about the hypersonic weapon, such as land attack type thing, which is Dark Eagle supposed to be. So how far are they in even initial operational capability, which is IOC? You know what? I wouldn't like you to quote me, but let's put it this way. I doubt they will deploy it even into IOC in 2026, judging by the track record of how this weapon was being, delayed after time after time after time. So it's not easy. But Scott is absolutely correct. We are basically, blade running, if you wish, and where will we fall depends a lot on so many fundamental factors today. But this time, unlike it was the Cold War, Russia doesn't have really plans. Well, I mean, Russia has contingency planning, okay? If they wouldn't have this plan, then general staff should have been, kicked out and, dissolved. Obviously, Russia has, for example, Plan Z, Z point, whatever, which is, massive invasion on, let's say, Eastern Europe, okay? Russians not going to do it. They are not in this posture. But yes, the only response the West can do today is somehow to place INF weapons, and we have at this stage Typhoon, which is essentially SM-6 is an anti-air defense missile, which is used on the primarily Aegis ships and the Aegis ashore installations. It's a good missile, but it's very long range, but it's not capable to shoot down modern hypersonic weapons at all. But Typhoon, it is good old tomahawks, flams, Will they put their nuclear warhead back as it was originally? Possible. I don't know. That's the whole thing. I don't know. But obviously, we have this situation developing, and Russians will be reacting to this. And one of the reactions, apart from responding, as Scott correctly pointed out, with deployment of Rubesh, will be updating or upgrading the, for example, Iskanders, which Russia has a plenty. I mean, like a lot. Okay, hundreds to put it, and I mean high hundreds, not 120 or 100. We are talking about hundreds, many. So, and of course, zircons. And that's alone, my gosh. And zircon is nuclear capable too. It could be, conventional, and it was used already in the combat to a devastating effect. And so once you have Iskanders, and then of course you have Kinjals and things like that. And yeah, Europe is covered, but Scott is absolutely correct. If the substance hits the fan, everybody gets it, everybody. And in this case, the nuclear strategic deterrent will be deployed by Russia. And we don't know how many, well, United States knows, satellites, they will tell you how many berets are right now on the combat patrol. But berets, Bulava can fly very far, and then Sarmat comes online, and then you have real trouble. Sarmat can carry, by different estimates, between, some people say it's up to 16, but minimum 10 avant-gardes, okay? Avant-garde has 1 megaton warhead. So one single Sarmat RS-28 missile, which has unlimited range. And again, the avant-garde itself, it was tested on 6,000 kilometers. Obviously, it's capable of way longer than that. So we are talking about even 5 Sarmats, okay? 5. And even minimum, you have 50 avant-gardes, okay? You cannot intercept them. You just can't. There's no technology anyway in the world, except for Russia, to intercept this thing. And each megaton class weapon. So you're talking about 50 megaton class weapons, which you cannot intercept. And can you imagine what it can bring? It's also the weapon designed also partially with the idea that if some nut jobs and war criminals will decide to unleash their, Armageddon on the world, and they will somehow will be able to, hide in Patagonia or New Zealand, doesn't matter. They will be caught. Russia can reach anywhere, in Antarctica if need be. So, and this is the whole situation. And Scott absolutely correctly stated, in some sense, to a certain degree, it depends now on the opinion of German people. But don't forget, Germany of 2024 is not Germany of 1982. It is a largely totalitarian society. You won't believe how many Germans, and I'm not talking about Russian Germans, from Kazakhstan, from Volga region, who started to move back to Germany. Well, not back really. They were born and raised in the Soviet Union, but they started going back to Germany in 1990s and, late 80s and things like that. No. We're talking about Germans who cannot speak Russian. They are from places like Munich, Hamburg, all kinds of things. Do you know how many applications for Russian citizenship from these people? Maria Zakharova, I quote her, she twice stressed it, tens of thousands. She said our embassies are freaking overwhelmed, and consulates in Germany by Germans requesting to move to Russia. So you see, we have this whole, why do they think they escape? Because they have Christian background. They don't want their children grow up in this, suffocating cultural situation, so-called cultural situation in Germany. And so we have this, complex of the political, technological, military, what have you, factors which play the game here. And will Germans react properly? And how much is institutional inertia, which Scott talks about? I hope so. It's there. Yeah, it should be there. So we'll see how Germans will react. I hope so. Their common sense will prevail. So, but
one last thing, guys, I did want to ask you about the conflict in the Middle East. Scott, I'm looking at it and people are talking about, well, what's Trump going to do come January with Gaza, etc. Man, Israel seems to be quite frank, it seems like they're taking a whooping. Now, I read the other day, I was reading the other day that they had a report that they're running out of tanks, that they're running out of equipment, that the injuries are considerably higher. So Netanyahu's here talking a lot, but it seems like they're asking for soldiers. I think he's here asking, I think he's not just talking to Congress, he's asking for something else, because it seems like they're taking a whooping. And now, the darn, the Houthis are slamming them. You're starting to see technological abilities by their adversaries that kind of demonstrates they're done. They can't win it. I mean, I just was watching another video that Hezbollah released. They're flying drones all over Israel, pointing out everything that they want to. Israel's doing a lot of talk. I don't think they can attack Hezbollah. Their economy has collapsed. This Israeli project is in complete and total collapse, and they're pretending like they can just keep on fighting and they're going to defeat whoever the hell Hezbollah. Meanwhile, one last thing, all of these Palestinian organizations, including, Hamas and Fatah, apparently were in Beijing signing some cooperation deal. Things ain't looking good for Israel, which they shouldn't. Anyway, your thoughts on where Israel is right now, Scott?
It's a world of hurt. Again, we come back to logistics. Israel never planned for a war of this duration and this intensity. Israel, at worst, they were looking at a repeat of August, 2006, maybe 30, 40 days maximum, a high intensity from their perspective, in which they would destroy Hezbollah, because they never planned on doing this to Hamas. That's the kicker in all this, is Israel never planned on doing a campaign in Gaza like this. They weren't ready for it, and Hamas has fundamentally beaten them. Running out of tanks doesn't mean that their tanks are being destroyed. It means that they can't repair them. The Israelis, they understand in tank warfare, you're going to lose a tread here, you're going to lose a transmission here, you're going to lose this here, and you withdraw that back to a rear area depot where you have maintainers who come out running out and they rip things off, put things on, get it up going, start it up, put the crew in, and off the tank goes back into battle. And that way you can maintain a certain level of intensity. Because of primarily Hamas, Israel's run out of the spare parts. So now every time Hamas gets a mobility kill, or takes out a transmission, or busts up the electronics so the turret can't turn, Israel used to be able to drag that thing off, stick it on the back of a heavy equipment transport, run it to a depot, get it fixed, and get it back to the unit. Can't do that anymore. So every damaged tank is now a destroyed tank, the equivalent of destroyed tank. Israel had to stop sending the old Merkava 3s, I think. They had sold them to Algeria or Morocco or somebody. They had to stop that contract because they have to keep them here and use them. They're out of those now. They're just out of tanks, and they haven't even started the big fight with Hezbollah. That's why I laugh when people are like, Israel's going into Hezbollah. With what? With what are they going in? They're not. In the United States, I mean, we the Merkava is a Merkava. We're not sitting on a stockpile of Merkava spare parts. I mean, there might be some compatibility. We might be able to provide something, but the bottom line is Israel's on the hook for that. I don't think they came here looking for the United States to provide some sort of magic military solution. I think Netanyahu understands that politically his goose is cooked. The IDF is on the verge of a revolt against him. If he orders them to go into Lebanon, I don't know if they'll obey those orders, and he knows that. He also knows that if he, for instance, accepts a ceasefire in Gaza, that's probably the end of his political career, because his right-wing coalition will collapse. He's here to basically get the American flag tattooed all over his forehead and his face and his arms. And he's going to come back, wearing the red, white, and blue. And he's going to go back to Israel and say, America loves me. I've been anointed by America as the chosen one. I and only I can lead Israel through this difficult time. I have this wonderful relationship with the Americans who are going to be standing by us as we work our way through this. And he's hopeful that by doing that, he can build a new coalition because he's going to lose the far right. And then he has to build a moderate coalition. And he's hopeful by getting anointed with the American holy water that will follow through. I don't know if he's going to be successful in that or not, but that's his effort. I think the pressure is on him to accept this ceasefire. I think Biden's going to be telling him to accept the ceasefire. I think, Kamala Harris not attending this car is a huge signal to him that don't take things for granted. You need to get in line with what the United States wants. So wrapping yourself in the American flag is a double-edged sword. I mean, on the one hand, yes, you get to sell yourself to the Israeli people as the chosen, American Jew. But on the other hand, you have to obey the United States. And Netanyahu has been reticent he's bragged about how he owns the United States, how he's bought the Congress, how he owns it. But right now, the reality is, at the end of the day, when America decides that it's over, it's over. Israel can't go on by itself. They can talk big, but they can't do it. And I think he's getting the whisper from across the board, it's over. What we're going to do for you now is wrap you in the flag, hug you, say you're us, you're one of us, we're with you. And then you have to go back, and that's your own political problem. But as far as we're concerned, this is over. You're done there. And if you don't, we're going to rip that flag off of you so fast, and you're going to fall so fast it's not even be funny. This is an act of desperation on the part of not just Netanyahu, but the Congress that he's bought and paid for. This is what he bought Congress to do. This is it. This is why his bought and paid for Israeli Congress is going to bring him in and give him standing ovations and prohibit anybody from speaking out. They're going to do this giant propaganda exercise so that Netanyahu can turn that into political capital at home. It's a huge gamble, but he has no choice because he's lost this war. This war is over.
Andrei, let me throw this at you too, since you're the military guy. I saw the video of this drone, the Houthi drone, right? And the thing was so loud. It sounded like it had a 2-cycle engine. It sounded wham, right? But what I read was it went through, as they said, Israel's layered air defense system. Well, I don't know how layered it is. If friggin' drones with a 2-cycle engine kind of sounded like one of those old Cox toy airplanes I had when I was in Boy Scouts goes flying through it, right? But here's my point. Ain't Israel. That's American stuff, right? Donald Trump recently said, yes, we want an Iron Dome. I don't know if you saw he says, America, we're going to build an Iron Dome, just like Israel has an Iron Dome. And I thought, well, I hope the hell it works better than Israel's Iron Dome. This Israel's defeat also says a lot about U.S. weaponry. It ain't working in Ukraine. Okay, they are against high-tech stuff. They're going against guys running around who are just dedicated, angry, and pissed. And might I add, it seems to me that Hezbollah is technologically matching Israel, in some instances defeating them. What do you think about the issue of Israel thinking they had this high-tech stuff and it was all American stuff? Man, this stuff seems to be flopping against Hezbollah and Hamas.
Well, Scott beautifully described the whole political and military situation there, and I totally defer to him. He knows this area way more than me. But in terms of air defense of Israel, it was talked up as usually. Well, most long-range systems which they have, including ABM, anti-ballistic missile systems, obviously not strategic, not intercontinental. They have their, INF type weapon. It's all Raytheon and Boeing,
right?
With some addition of the, some Israeli input, some Israeli electronics. It's primarily all American. Iron Dome is it's a fiction. It is designed to intercept slow, predictable ballistic trajectory Katyushas, so they calculate this trajectory, intercept them. That's about it. That's the only thing it's good for. I don't know what Trump is talking about. I don't think he understands missile technology at all. I mean, we know that, so, but yeah, it's wanted, the air defense of Israel is primarily, it's all fiction. It's pretty much a mythological thing. And when Iran attacked it, the spin which was given to this attack in US media, it was hilarious. They were inventing things but Iran did exactly what it set out to do. And they just demonstrated how pathetic it is. They started with what? Oh, 4 missiles. Oh, okay, 6 missiles went through. Oh, 9 missiles went through. Well, how about actually they hit all the intermediate ballistic missiles on Israeli bases while they were using drones, specifically, the depleting of the package. They indeed depleted not just Iron Dome cannot intercept really anything serious. They depleted those medium and long range air defense systems. As I already stated, they are mostly Boeing and Raytheon, so they have Israeli names, titles, and so there you go. That's everything you need to know about it. So and they fly drones. Hezbollah. Well, Hezbollah, we all know what Hezbollah is. It's Iran. Okay? So primarily, they're not necessarily that close. They are practically right now almost, separate military force, but they certainly have an anchor in Syria. They played a critical role. Hezbollah played a
real quick, Andrei. But when you said, sir, I did want to say this. I understand that Assad was in Moscow meeting with President Putin, and President Putin reiterated something about helping him to secure his sovereignty. Oh, and I think Erdogan and Assad in Moscow. They're trying to iron that Turkey-Syria thing out.
The most important here, I didn't follow Erdogan, but I know that Erdogan obviously dropped a bombshell when he stated that we need to restore our relations with Syria, we need to work out our differences, we have to coexist peacefully, and things of this nature. It was like, wow, finally, so we'll see. Erdogan talks a lot, but he does not always deliver. Okay? Yeah. So, but that's a very interesting development. So yes, and that's good. But then again, Putin definitely has some input on Erdogan, no doubt about it, especially if the story of GRU Special Forces saving Erdogan during the coup attempt. So, and whoever was playing those, Russia was involved. So that is why they remain fairly good friends. Although Erdogan, as we know, he's extremely multi-vectored guy. Okay, he is able to sit on several chairs. So I think he thinks he can on several chairs simultaneously. But this is the whole new dynamics, especially with Israel being actually exposed that it's paper tiger. Okay, let's put it this way, realistically, and how much Arabs, with the help of Iran, of course, which is in itself a shocker, Shiites helping Sunnis primarily, expose that. This is game changer, I think. And Scott beautifully described the whole political dynamics in Israel, and I totally defer to Scott on this matter because he knows it way more than me. So,
all right, everybody, go to scottritter.com. And
go
ahead. Yeah, you get the last word, Scott Ritter.
Well, I don't want the last word.
I'm just saying because we're leaving. That's all.
It's in keeping, because Andrei touched upon it. Where we're dealing with a new reality right now in the Middle East, which is a weakened Israel, and in America that is likewise diminished in terms of its stature. The United States and Israel right now. This is why I always laugh when laugh's the wrong word, because basically you should be crying nonstop about what's happening in Gaza. There's nothing funny about it. The horrific slaughter of the Palestinian people is a moral stain on humanity, to be frank. But when I hear, America's APAC owned, that doesn't mean what it used to mean, guys, because APAC is representing Israel that isn't what it was. Israel doesn't get to dictate outcomes anymore. Russia and China, because even though Hamas and the Palestinian Authority delegations were in Beijing inking the deal, that was an ideal born in Moscow. The Russians are the ones that started the talk about bringing Hamas and the Palestinian Authority together. Why? Because Israel says we're not going to deal with Hamas. America says we're not going to make the Israel. Hamas is a terror. Well, ladies, Hamas doesn't exist anymore. Okay, what's going to exist is this fusion government that is Palestinian. And Israel no longer gets a vote, and America doesn't get a vote. It's checkmate. The Russians and the Chinese just checkmated Israel and the United States on that. And now there's another thing. The United States has created this perfect mess in Syria. I mean, just think about Idlib and what it is with Uyghurs and Chechens, and I mean every radical, lunatic, fringe, Salafist, Wahhabist, Al-Qaedist is there in Idlib, and ostensibly it's an unsolvable problem, which was what it's designed to be, an unsolvable problem. China and Russia have just shown that they can solve any problem. The Chinese and the Russians got Iran and Saudi Arabia to reconcile. They now just got Fatah and Hamas, if you know the history, they hate each other. They fought in 2006, 2007, a civil war. There's no love lost. They're now unified, and because they understand that the momentum's on their side and that they can't give Israel any excuse or leverage or anything politically. They just took the rug out from underneath Israel. It's the end of Israel because now you have a Palestinian state that the world could say, well, we can't talk about Palestinian state as long as there's Hamas. There's not Hamas anymore. Now the world has to talk about Palestinian state. And they'll start out with a two-state solution. But Israel can't do a two-state solution, so Israel will kill itself. Israel will be called upon to kick the settlers out. Can't do that. Israel can't survive that. You're going to see hundreds of thousands, millions of Israelis flee Israel, and that's the end of Israel. And now this singular, unified Palestinian entity will become the head of the Palestinian state. That's the direction we're heading. And I think Moscow and China are going to solve the Syrian problem too. We are looking at a situation today where, before we were talking about Ukraine and all that stuff, but the point I wanted to make is that Putin doesn't lead off with Ukraine. Putin leads off with BRICS. Putin leads off with geopolitics. Putin leads off with the economy. That's where the Russians are. That's where their focus is. That's where the Chinese focus is. That's where the Indian focus is. Putin just gave the biggest bear hug to Modi that you can imagine. And everybody said, well, that won't last. The Indians and the Chinese will never get along, except suddenly they're getting along. You're seeing them solve all these problems. Why? Because BRICS is around the corner. What's going to happen in Kazan in October? We keep throwing that term out there, game changer, game changer. This is game changing. This is seismic. This is, catastrophic for the West, what's about to happen, because diplomacy is the name of the game for these people, and they are masters at it. What China just accomplished can't be just simply pushed aside and ignored. This is a big deal, and it complicates, I think fatally so, the Zionist cause, because Zionist Israel can't live in a two-state solution. But by making Hamas and the PLA come together, they're now, the world will insist on a two-state solution. And that's it, game, set, match. So I just wanted to bring that up there, that the Chinese and the Russians are doing things that don't have anything to do with war and have everything to do with peace and diplomacy, and they're succeeding. And the West is ignoring it.
And that ICJ ruling, the ICJ just made a ruling. Are you familiar with that ruling, Scott?
Oh, 100%. It's the end of Israel.
You could take a couple minutes. I hate to keep you guys, but that is a very, very important ruling. Yeah. You got a minute or two to explain what it is.
Well, I mean, basically, the ICJ now has come in and said that Israel is an illegal occupation state. It's an apartheid state. And this sets the stage for the delegitimation, it's getting late. There's a big word in there. It's a delegitimize. You put them together, you get delegitimization. I don't know if that's a process. Marines make up words. I think I just made up one. But the delegitimizing of Israel. This is a huge ruling. Now, it's not enforceable, but it doesn't matter. The principle, the legal principle now is set forth that everything Israel is doing, everything Israel has done is illegal, and that Israel itself is an illegitimate entity. And this changes because even though in the United States, the arrogance of the American people is, well, we don't care what the International Court of Justice, there's a whole bunch of other people, because it is the court of reference for the international law, for the United Nations. And there's a whole bunch of other people out in the world that go, you may not care about it, but we do. And now any government that's been on the edge of, do we support a Palestinian state, et cetera, they now have the legal framework. This is a game-changing thing. And when you combine it with the diplomacy that the Russians and the other thing, this is a victory for Russian and Chinese diplomacy. I'll tell you why. There was a time when the International Court of Justice wouldn't even taken up this case,
Right.
because the United States just wouldn't allow it to happen. But now, because of the diminished stature of the United States and the increased stature of Russia and China, the court took it up, because the court is no longer looking around saying there's only one godfather here. They're looking around going, there's a whole bunch of godfathers here, and those two guys are pretty serious. We're going to have to do this. And they did the right thing. This is the right thing to do. This is the law. This is the kind of thing that should happen all the time, but America won't allow it to happen. And it's now empowered the world to say, we're going to stand up to Israel. We're going to support a Palestinian state. This is sort of one of the culminating moments of the victory that Hamas was seeking when it initiated its attack on Israel on October 7th. October 7th was all about creating the conditions for the creation of a Palestinian state. And all the sacrifice that the Palestinian people have made from October 7th until today is now starting to bear fruit with this ICJ ruling, which doesn't find Hamas or the Palestinian people to be terrorists and the evil. Israel. Israel is the bad guy. There's no debating this. And because of the tenacity of Hamas, Israel couldn't wipe them off the face of the earth, and Russia and China had to deal with them. And what they've done is they've created this new fusion government, which is a game changer. So I think right now the world is closer to a Palestinian state today than they have been at any time since Israel was created. So it's a big deal.
And I'll close out by saying this. Sergei Lavrov gave a speech recently at the United Nations, and you can go out there, everybody, and find the text. I think it is a very, very important speech from the perspective of not just what he said, but understanding how Russia views the world. Russia views the U.S. as an imperialist power. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. I mean, he basically quoted Tony Blinken when it came to Israel, saying, well, basically, I'm quoting, if you put the law out of the, Tony Blinken said something to the effect of, notwithstanding the legal issues here, I'll tell you what it was. It was the Golan Heights, where he was asked, do you recognize the Golan Heights? And he says, well, not if you don't touch on the legal issues, because obviously it's illegal for Israel to seize the Golan Heights and to occupy it, then it's very important to Israel. But the bottom line was Sergei Lavrov really got into how they see the U.S. He did it at the UN, and I think it was a powerful speech. So everybody go out, find Sergei Lavrov's speech and read it. I think you'll find it interesting. ScottRitter.com. That's where you want to go. You want to go to Smoothie X12 blog, which is Reminiscence of the Future, right? Is your blog. And Smoothie X12, great YouTube channel. Make sure you check out everything that Andrei and Scott are doing. Thanks a lot, guys. Oh, what do we got here?
Yeah. Plug this thing.
Covering Ukraine. The Scott Ritter interviews through the eyes of Scott. Where can people find that book, Scott?
You can find it on Amazon. I think August 1st, it actually Amazon will start shipping it out. People have been ordering it, but claritypress.com also sells it. Garland Nixon wrote a very nice blurb for it, and Andrei Martyanov wrote the foreword. So, and Larry Johnson wrote the afterword, and then Anya Kay did the interviews, and I contributed a little bit. But it's a good book. It basically all the issues that we talked about tonight are covered in this book about Ukraine. It's a comprehensive review of how we got there, where we're going, and what's going on today. So,
Andrei, where can people find your books, Andrei?
Oh yeah, let me plug that thing in. Yeah. They finally. Oh yeah, man. How could I forgot? Okay, here it is. Where?
Put it right in front of your face there, right in front of your face.
Okay,
A little bit
there
over
you go.
right.
You see?
There we go.
Yeah,
America's
okay,
Final
there we
War.
go. Yeah, there we go. So
America's Final War.
They finally shipped it Amazon and claritypress.com. Clarity Press is kind of the house for all delinquents like me. And
you published Clarity Press too?
Yeah.
I know, I'm joking.
Well, look, just make sure it wasn't. I don't know if you guys know Caleb Maupin, but he had this book that he wrote in 2020, Kamala Harris and the Future of America. And it wasn't kind to Kamala Harris. Let's just say that. It's been up since 2020. He got up Monday morning. They took it down. Monday morning, when she became the presumptive nominee, basically, in a nutshell, Amazon is involved in election interference. They took down, there's all of these books up about Trump, though. Trump the traitor, Trump the Russian bot, Trump, all of those Luke Harding books are still up there. But the one stinking book that was critical of Kamala Harris, Amazon decided, I guess they're part of the election interference move. All right, guys, thanks a lot, everybody.
Wait, what is your book about? I don't know what your book's about. It's America's Final War. Which one? We have so many.
Right. Wars. Final wars.
The final,
Is it about Ukraine? Is it a domestic?
Yeah, it's Ukraine. It's only Ukraine.
Okay.
So everybody's got to get that. Andrei Martyanov, America's Final War. We all got to go out and get that book tomorrow. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Hey, guys, make sure you share this on all your social media platforms. Make sure you follow these guys, donate to them, etc. We're out.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.